My sophomore year of college, I went on an alternative spring break trip to Honduras, sponsored by Church World Service. That was the first time I witnessed the kind of poverty billions of people experience every day. But we weren't just there to look or to lend our unskilled college student hands in building houses. We were there to learn about the international trade policies and systems that had led to the destitution we were there to witness. We were told, straight up, by the trip's organizers, that the point of our coming was not really to work. They didn't really need our unskilled labor. We were there to learn so that our own understanding of these global systems could be changed, and so that we could use our eventual and relative positions of power to advocate for a better world. When Hurricane Mitch hit Honduras in 1988, mudslides destroyed whole towns and 7,000 people died. The reason the mudslides were so bad was because the mountains had been stripped of their trees so that people could grow corn and coffee there. The reason the people had to grow their shallow-rooted crops on the mountainsides was because they'd been forced off of the land in the valley by Chiquita and Dole, who were backed by our government as it lobbied on their behalf with the Honduran government. And our government was and continues to be in a strong position to bargain for advantageous positions for the interests of its corporations, since it holds so much Honduran debt. My group spent a week with a community called Nuevo Porvenir, which means new future. Their mountain village had been swept away in a mudslide and they'd lost everything. The people had banded together to build housing in the valley where it was safer, but the fields were still several hours' walk away on the mountains. The men would go to work the fields in shifts, staying in the fields for a few days before coming back to the village to be with their families. There was no electricity, and the unpurified water came straight from a spring on a nearby mountain and was carried to the village by a pipe that had been laid by a previous work group. Chickens provided by the Heifer Project laid the eggs that supplied the community with its sole source of protein. The community shared a bank of latrines, showers, and sinks. The one little store in town had snacks, but not much in the way of fresh food and no clothes or household items. I don't know where people got their supplies from, but wherever it was, it must have been far away. The people of Nuevo Porvenir had no mode of transportation besides their own feet. Many of the children had shocks of orangish red going through their dark hair. We all naively thought it was some kind of fashion statement until our guide mentioned that it was a sign of severe malnutrition. The people of Nuevo Porvenir had been living in tents made from Red Cross tarps for 2 years. They had decided to build their houses together with no one's roof going on until everyone's house was built. They had decided to move forward into their new future as one community. When I returned to Ann Arbor after spring break, I experienced what's called reverse culture shock. After just one immersive week, I felt totally out of place at home. And I vividly remember walking into Meijer to get groceries, getting completely overwhelmed, and walking back out without buying anything. I didn't buy anything but food for a whole year. I couldn't get my head around the fact that regardless of whether I wanted it or could afford it, there was just stuff everywhere. I had access to anything and everything. And this was even before online shopping was much of a thing, back when Amazon only sold books. And I want to be very clear that I didn't come away with some romanticized impression that the people of Nuevo Porvenir were happier because poverty made their lives simpler. The small window of that experience gave me an understanding of how difficult their lives were in comparison with mine, and that the difference between our lives was a mere accident of birth. I was angry at the injustice of the overabundance of stuff in my life contrasted with the total lack of basic necessities in Nuevo Porvenir. I was feeling extremely complicated emotions about the fact that my passport and my social location allowed me to visit Nuevo Porvenir and then leave, and that these people I had met could not do the same. And what's more, I could have been tempted by all the stuff I might have wanted before that trip, and now I didn't want any of it. My capitalistic instincts were broken. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. These words can be taken in a couple of ways. Most often, we seem to interpret this verse as meaning God will keep us from finding ourselves in a state of dire need, as the people of Nuevo Porvenir and so many others do every day. But maybe for Americans in the age of targeted social media advertising, this verse can speak to the fact that it's so easy to find ourselves wanting things we don't need and didn't even know existed until 30 seconds ago. The 10th commandment instructs us not to wish we had things we don't have. It's an extension of the first and second commandments to love God above all other things, to not make an idol or worship anything that isn't God. But the environment we're in makes us want all the things, and our love of excess is not only leading us to hoard our resources at the expense of others, but it's killing the world around us. And it's not very healthy for us either. We're surrounded by stuff, but we're incredibly lonely. We get dopamine hits from one-click ordering, but the high only lasts for as long as it takes to open the box. We buy, but then we feel empty again. What do we find ourselves really wanting? The fourth Sunday of Easter is always Good Shepherd Sunday, and this Sunday's texts are all about sheep. A good shepherd makes sure all of her sheep are cared for. A good shepherd understands that they all have to get what they need, and that it's not okay for any of the sheep, for a few to get everything or to get an excess of what they don't need. A good shepherd protects her sheep, keeps them from danger, and feeds them with good food. A good shepherd also helps her sheep care for the earth by moving them so that they don't overgraze, allowing the grass to grow again before they return. Perhaps a good shepherd also helps her sheep not only to have all they need, but also to not want things they don't need. Perhaps a good shepherd helps us find what we really need in the community that's right here around us rather than constantly going off searching for something else. Perhaps a good shepherd also helps us to look at each other and care for each other too. This week's gospel text is Jesus' response to what has just happened in John 9. He has just healed a man who was born blind. And not only does Jesus heal him, but then after the man is kicked out of the temple for declaring that Jesus has healed him, the man finds Jesus again and knows him because he hears his voice. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Our wants can lead us astray, but it's the voice of the Good Shepherd who calls us back to himself, calls us back to Jesus, back to love, into the healing embrace of community and real belonging. Amen.